Good evening, folks. Welcome to a Public Oz Cyclone Chasers update today, the 11th of April 2017. My name's Chris Nitzo. This update sponsored by our major sponsor, Campbell Scientific Australia, when measurements matter. Folks, the big news through the afternoon has been, it's been very cold in Darwin, unseasonably cold. In fact, I think one of the coldest April days on record. But more importantly, the tropical cyclone warning has been cancelled for the northwest coast. The reason being is that our little blighter over here has actually tracked over land and hasn't shown signs of any real rapid intensification over the last 24 hours. And we'll go through why that is the case shortly. But the system is expected to now drift in a west-southwesterly direction. In fact, probably accelerate in a west-southwesterly direction rather than just drift. And the system, once it does move away here to the west-southwest, conditions will ease off in Darwin itself. Before we talk any further about that threat, let me just get rid of some Queenslanders who might be watching this. Okay, so we've got Tropical Cyclone Cook that's moved through the area of New Caledonia yesterday. We talked about that last night. The system is since being sheared away and may pose a threat to the North Island of New Zealand in the next few days. There's also disorganised convection out here in the North Coral Sea, which we are watching. We're keeping an eye on it. There is no sign of any organisation at this stage, and as we said to subscribers this morning, and I'm saying it to you tonight, we need to see some organisation of this convection if it's got any chance of developing into a TC. Look, environmental conditions in the Northern Coral Sea are quite favourable, but the surface level circulation actually needs to start taking shape. At the moment, you can see it's a fairly elongated trough type feature through the Coral Sea, and until we actually get some tightening and an actual centre of circulation, then it's got no chance. The copy and paste in the tropical cyclone outlook for the Coral Sea is strong. However, we finally have the typo here. Instead of saying none is currently expected to develop, they've changed it to none are currently expected to develop into tropical cyclones. So nothing has changed there in the Coral Sea. There are little lows that will be forming over the next couple of days, none of them expected to organise. You can see the circulation just trying to take shape here tomorrow sometime, just on the southeastern tip of PNG. The circulation then travels to the west, but there's no sign of any tightening up of that system. And you can see the northern edge, it's probably producing winds of about 5 to 10 knots. The southern edge, of course, is producing some strong winds, and that's not because the low is strong. That's because there's a pressure gradient squeeze. So because the pressure is a little bit lower here, and we've got a nice big ridge developing across the state, it's creating this strong pressure gradient squeezing effect here of the air mass. And so what we're getting are these very strong winds. So there will be some strong winds tomorrow and into particularly Thursday and Friday up here in the north tropical coast region. So particularly just to the north of Cairns, you can see those winds, sustained winds at 20 to 25 knots. Obviously, gusts will be up around that 60 to 70 kilometre an hour mark. So brace yourselves for that. Look, it's going to be possibly up into the strong wind warning area here with 25 to 30 knots developing around the Cooktown coastline. But in general, we're not expecting this system to intensify into a tropical cyclone. It is expected to make landfall or move towards the North Peninsula, and it will enhance the weather anywhere where it's enhancing the winds. So everywhere that's getting this strong southeasterly, being squeezed in towards the low pressure trough or system, those areas will receive some moderate to heavy rainfall. And so you can see if we fast forward to Friday that the heaviest rainfall is occurring up here in the northeast peninsula, and anywhere north of Cairns is receiving some showers from this particular airstream, but only the exposed coast anywhere further south. In the long term, that Coral Sea disturbance will move into the Gulf of Carpentaria, and of course we'll need to keep an eye on it as it pushes west across the Gulf of Carpentaria. In its wake, there will be a continual trough system in the Coral Sea, which once again will need to be watched, but no recognisable and no structured low pressure systems are expected along that trough in the foreseeable future. Alright, let's go to the actual topic of conversation today, and that's the tropical low here to the near north of Darwin. You can certainly see there is some rotation on radar quite evident. However, Ideally, what we want to see is we want to see this thing tighter than it is at the moment. It's a very loose, ragged system, and it's absolutely no chance of developing into a tropical cyclone anytime shortly. It needs to get out into the open water as well. So it needs to A, tighten up, B, get out into some open water to have any chance. Let's take a look at why it hasn't developed. The biggest issue for this system is this thing called vertical wind shear. Vertical wind shear is the change of direction or wind speeds with height through the atmosphere. And when we have a high sheared environment, it doesn't allow a tropical cyclone to develop convection around its center. Because of that and that reason alone, we haven't seen the system intensify into a tropical cyclone. This area of very strong shear has been present for the last 6 months of the wet season, and it hasn't abated. And we were expecting, we were hoping, we were sort of thinking that this area here of low vertical wind shear and this area here of low vertical wind shear would build underneath the system as it was tracking southwards. It hasn't happened. This high shear environment continues to operate through the Northern Territories, Timor Sea and Arafura Sea region, and because of that and that reason alone, we haven't seen the system intensify. So all the shear forecasts that we're expecting to see this wind shear anomaly decrease, and so we were expecting to see some nicer conditions. All those forecasts were wrong, thrown out the window. It simply never happened. Anyway, the Bureau of Meteorology do still expect this system to get into very marginal Category 1 intensity before weakening off the WA coastline. And therefore the cyclone warning has been reissued, but this time for Western Australian waters and Western Australian mainland areas from the border all the way through to Columbaroo or Mitchell Plateau, and then we've got a watch extending further to the southwest here. So the expectation is that the system may make Category 1 intensity once it gets away from Darwin and actually gets into some open water. Look, it's still going to be battling this vertical wind shear, as you saw in that imagery. It's not, that wind shear is not going anywhere. But hopefully, if the system does get into this region here, there may be just enough things going right for it to make a marginal Category 1 at this stage. For those of you that want to know about the longer term with this system, it is expected to move in a westerly direction, lying off the WA coastline. Not expecting this to develop into anything significant off that coastline, but it is expected to morph or wash out into a trough system would be a better way of putting it, and that trough system will probably affect the Pilbara region. And if you happen to be east of that trough system or east of the low as it makes landfall in about 6 or 7 days' time, then you're going to be seeing a fair amount of shower and storm activity. If you're going to be west of it, you'll see absolutely nothing. Surprisingly, the GFS model seems to have a better grasp on this system than the European model, and we can see here the system tracking in between Gun Point and the Tiwi Islands, which is pretty close to where it is right now, and then tracking in a westerly direction overnight tonight into early tomorrow morning. And you can see it's packing a punch here on the southwestern quadrant. That's because, once again, if we go back to that vertical wind shear analysis, and you notice the direction of the shear, so you're getting shear coming in from a northeasterly to northeasterly direction. So it's pulling the storm clusters away from the cyclone in that direction. And so if you happen to be underneath those areas of strong convection, which are likely to be southwest of the circulation, you're also likely to be experiencing the greatest amount of wind. Current wind speeds around the region aren't all that fantastic, 33 kilometres an hour coming in from the south-southeast in Darwin. So that's indicative of the fact that you are now located probably just to the southeast of this system, or just to the south of this system, in fact, would be a more accurate way of saying it. The idea here is that eventually what will happen is that as you pull away from the system, or as the system pulls away from you, I should say, you'll get a northerly wind that comes in the wake of the system. So as soon as you feel the wind starting to shift to the east, northeast, or northeast, you'll know that the system has passed to your west. And then those winds will become northerly through tomorrow, and then into Thursday, the chances are they'll weaken right out, and you won't even know that there's any wind at all. Now remember, the vertical wind shear plays a massive role in who gets the rain as well, not just who gets the wind. Now, the expectation is that as the system is to your north, you're in that favourable little area here where you're getting a lot of convection, and that's what we're seeing on the radar. Now, as the system pulls away to your west, because it's being sheared away, remember, away to the southeast and to the south, because of the northerly vertical wind shear, you're probably not going to be seeing much in the way of rainfall once the system moves away from you overnight tonight. And you can see here the system continuing to track away through tomorrow and into Thursday. All the heavy rain is down here with it and just to the south of it. And you can see on the coastline, all you're left with is just some isolated showers coming in on that lovely little northerly stream. Very, very similar sort of situation from the European model. So there's very good agreement here that any significant rainfall from this system is going to be to the south of it. And let's not forget this little nook area here that is getting a beautiful little north to northeasterly convergent flow. So this area here in the northeast Arnhem district is likely to see some very heavy rainfall over the next 24 hours or so. So this is a long way away from the cyclone, but it's all tied in because what the cyclone does is it brings in this air and tries to wrap it around itself. And without the cyclone there, this stuff wouldn't be happening. So we've got this north to northeasterly airstream. So this part of the air comes in from there, this part of the air comes in from there, this part comes in from here. They get squeezed along, and where they get squeezed along, we see big rain. But as far as cyclones go, this thing is a major, major disappointment in terms of both wind and rainfall. Anyway, the chances are that it may continue to push to the west here, and hopefully we'll see some sign of development of the system, at least so it can become our 7th named system of the year. So for Darwin residents, the heavy-ish type rain is probably going to be finished by around about early tomorrow morning. Still looking at some moderate to heavy falls coming in on the north coast, though, in that northerly airstream. But for Darwin itself, the fun is over by tomorrow morning. Now, tomorrow during the day, there is still going to be some showers coming through, and they will be heavy at times, no doubt about that. But we're not talking about a blanket area of heavy rainfall here on the northeastern edge of the tropical cyclone or the tropical low. And into the future, you can see as the system pulls away, we're left with a nice little northeasterly airstream here, so expecting to continue to see scattered showers and thunderstorms, particularly over inland parts of the Northern Territory and along that north coast, not so much for Darwin. The greatest severe weather threat for the region is over the next 3 to 6 hours, though, and the Bureau of Meteorology has issued a severe weather warning for this exact purpose. So what we're looking at here is the Severe Weather Threat Index. So this looks at the opportunity or possibility for severe weather to occur in the area. And it uses a lot of different parameters to come up with this calculation. Any values over 300 make us pay attention, particularly when they happen in the Northern Territory. So we can see here at 6:30 we've got fairly high values. At 9:30 those values increase to their greatest level around Darwin CBD and just inland around that Palmerston and towards Adelaide River in that sort of region. Then as we go through the evening into the overnight period, around midnight, you can see the severe weather threat across Darwin begins easing off, but the severe weather threat is still present across areas just to the south of Darwin. And that quickly abates as the cyclone moves away to the west-southwest. You'll see that severe weather threat quickly reduce through the morning tomorrow, and then by lunchtime tomorrow you're back to it's just your typical showers and storms. The severe weather threat heads towards Kununurra, Wyndham through the afternoon and evening tomorrow, and you can see it here, those values over 300 down here, whereas the values up here in the northwestern top end have dropped below the 300 magical number, and so our focus tomorrow is obviously going to be up here in the North Kimberley, Wyndham, Columbaroo eventually, Wyndham, Kununurra, and to a lesser extent early in the day, our focus will be in Port Keats. So if you're a subscriber, we'll have a chat to you in the morning and see how this severe weather threat is progressing. If you're not a subscriber, we'll have another chat to you tomorrow evening about the threat to the North Kimberley around Wyndham, Kununurra and Columbaroo. To become a subscriber and get access to all the goodies that we give subscribers, there's too many to list here today. AusCycloneChasers.com.au. There'll be a subscribe button just in there. Click the subscribe button whenever you see it. It'll be coming up in big red writing. And you can help us do what we do best. That's document tropical cyclone. And you'll get access to some of Australia's best tropical cyclone analysis and information. Have a great night. Have a safe night. Talk again tomorrow.